everyone, I'm Vanessa and today I'm back with my best books of 2020. So yesterday we did the worst and most disappointing books of 2020, so if you missed that one, I'll leave it somewhere for you. So we have already purged that negative energy. It's gone, it's behind us. The horrible books, they're behind us. They can't hurt us anymore. And today we're gonna do the best books, the most wonderful, happiest, most awesome books of 2020. I'm really excited. I read a lot of good books this year. It was kind of hard to narrow it down. I have 10. I don't have these in any particular order. I think I'm just gonna do them in like the order that I read them in, January to December. I'm not gonna rank them. They're all good. They're all the best. So the first book I read this year that made my like favorites list was Sherwood by Megan Spooner. This is a Robin Hood retelling, but if Maid Marian was Robin Hood. You know what I mean? I love Megan Spooner. I also really loved Hunted, which she did a few years ago, which is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Her writing is just, it's beautiful. I do have a full review video if you want to watch that instead back when everything was fresh for me. But just in general, I remember really thinking that it got off to a slow start. It definitely did. I've seen a lot of people DNF this. And I get it because the front half was just super slow, but it was so worth it once I got to the back half. Like everything just fell together. One specific thing that I remember really liking was the way that it handled the retelling. This story added nuance and complexity and like a new perspective to the Robin Hood myth for me. And I really love when a retelling can do that. The romance in this story specifically, I think just really took a lot of things and flipped them on their heads and makes you interrogate them a little bit more and like examine them and think like, okay, why is this always casted this way? Maybe things are more complex than that. And I love that it did that for the Robin Hood myth. Again, I have a full better review if you want, where I'm sure I'm much more eloquent about this book, but just know that I loved it and you should totally read it. Okay, the next one that I have on here is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This is like set in the 80s and it's about two girls that are best friends in high school and one of them ends up being possessed. And the story follows the other one trying to like figure out what's going on and how to save her and help her. What I loved about this book was that it just was so easy to get sucked into. I read it in one sitting. It was like, boom, I was in this story and everything felt so genuine and so emotional and so real. Like all of the emotions between these two girls. I loved that it focused on a female friendship and just how strong that is to get through like these horrible things. And I also, of course, I love the vibe that it's like kind of scary, but it didn't feel too scary for me to enjoy because I'm also a big chicken. I love horror movies, I love scary books, I love ghosts, everything, but I'm a huge chicken. So this hit a sweet spot for me that was scary enough to be really fun and really exciting, but not too scary, you know? I didn't have nightmares, and I like that. Okay, the next book oh, this is a heavy one. We Are Not From Here. And this is a really heartbreaking and gut-wrenching book. It is about these three teenagers from, I think Guatemala, I could be wrong, but they're from Central America, and the things in their hometown that they are faced with are just so, I mean, there's no option. They can't stay. They have to leave. It's that or their life, you know what I mean? So they have to get out of Guatemala and they're trying to reach the US border, and the story follows that journey, and it's absolutely harrowing, and it's not something that anyone should ever have to go through, let alone children. And like I said, it was incredibly gut-wrenching to read what these kids have to do and go through, even after they reach the US border. The horror does not end. The shit show is not over. If anything, it gets even scarier. And that, I mean, it's something that I've always been kind of aware of and kind of emotional about, because like I lived in El Paso for several years, and it is something that's like right there every day. It's something that is so cruel and inhuman, and I just don't understand it. I think it's something that we don't often let ourselves sit with the full impact of what our country is doing to these people. Even though this book was so painful to read, I think that it's so important, and I hope that more people read it, because that's a feeling that I think a lot of people need to have before these things will change. Yeah, highly recommend. I'm gonna move on to another book that's kind of heavy also, but still really good, like really amazing book. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This book was beautiful though. Like it was about really important and really heavy things, but it was just gorgeous. Basically, in this book, the author is writing a letter to his son, and just kind of explaining like his experiences as a Black man in America, especially just the feeling of living inside that body and knowing that your body is never safe. Your body is never fully under your control because there are all of these outside forces that could at any moment hurt it or take it away from you. And him feeling that way about not only himself, but now that he has a child, feeling that way about his child. And this book was just like really, like I said, it was about heavy things, but it wasn't like unpleasant to read. It was gorgeously written. It was extremely just emotional, but in a really beautiful way. So I really recommend this book as well. And then the next book that I have on this list is actually a series, the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. I read all of these. I just started Come Tumbling Down last night. But I read the first 4. I fell head over heels in love with them. I know I'm late to the party, but I'm glad I'm here now because they're so good. These are about a school for children who have traveled through portals to other worlds, right? Like kids who went to Narnia or Wonderland or whatever, and then they come back to Earth and they're like, this isn't their home anymore. They don't belong here. They don't want to be here. There's a school for them to, you know, be with each other and kind of work through that together. And it's just really good. Obviously you get to see these kids at that school, but you also sometimes get to travel into the worlds with them and like see their backstories and the worlds that they went to. I don't know, it's just a really fun series and I really enjoyed it. Okay, and then I have a book, I believe this is a debut from this author. It's called Eventide. I can't believe this was a debut because it was on point. It was so good. This is like all of these different genres mixed together and it does all of them wonderfully. It's a historical fiction, mystery, romance, paranormal, horror, just everything. It's about these 2 sisters. I want to say it's like the 20s, 30s, maybe 40s era. I'm not totally sure, but they go from New York. They're sent as orphans to live in like rural Arkansas and they end up getting adopted by separate families. But the older sister, our main character, she's just determined to get her younger sister and her reunited. And in this little town that they're in, there's like definitely some weird stuff going on. You know, the older sister is like seeing weird things in the woods. There's like a little girl who might be a ghost and there's like a creepy well. And so you definitely have that kind of like cool, kind of spooky vibes to it, but you also just have their experience of living in this like Arkansas farm town and, you know, forming relationships with her new family and, you know, the other people in the town. And also as she's getting to know the other people in the town, there's some mysterious things. Like there's some people whose stories aren't really making sense to her and she wants to get to the bottom of them. So you also have that like cool, fun mystery aspect and it's just really, it was really good. Everything about it to me just felt so on point. It was just executed brilliantly and I loved it so much. So this is definitely a high point for me this year. Another high point for me in the spooky genre was Harrow Lake. And I do have a full review on this as well. So if you want to watch that, I'm sure it's much more coherent than this is gonna be, but this is a YA and it's about the daughter of a famous horror movie director, and one day she comes home and her father has been like stabbed in their apartment, and so she, while he's recovering in the hospital, she has to go live with her grandmother, her mom's mom, who she doesn't know because her mom like left them when she was a baby. And it's a super weird town, very stuck in the past, very just creepy, which I really enjoyed because to me what I loved about this book so much was that it had such Gothic vibes. Obviously it's set in like modern day in the American Midwest, right? It still had such Gothic vibes, you know, like the main character going to this creepy old decrepit place and just feeling like all of these themes of the past haunting you and the past imprisoning you and stuff like this. It was really good. And also the spookiness was just so fun. Like this town, it's also has its own like weird urban legends and stuff. There's this like Mr. Jitters character who's super creepy and plays in, and the girl learns more about these urban legends and how they kind of connect with like her father and his movies and also her mother and her mother's childhood growing up in this town. It's just really cool. It's really cool. Please read it if you like stuff like that. The next book that I have on here is The Grace Year. I loved this. I'm even just now reminiscing about my time reading this. It was just a fun reading experience for me. This is another one that I got sucked into and couldn't put down. It's a YA and it's hard to explain. It's kind of like this weird dystopian village setting. They basically believe that young women have like evil magic powers, and so every year all of the girls who are 16 get sent to the frickin' woods and they have to spend a year in the woods like camping out, surviving, so that they can dispel their evil magic. And when they come back to the village, they're ready to be like pure, good, subservient wives and stuff like that. Yeah, I know. So our main character is one of these girls, and the book follows her going into the woods, and like really it's a lot going on in the woods. Just, I mean, you gotta think, you got a whole group of teenage girls who have all been told that they have magical powers camping out in the woods for a year. And they have to take care, like no one is helping them. No one is dropping supplies. And it's like scary in a survival aspect, but also kind of spooky in the like, you don't know, maybe they do have magic powers. Maybe there is supernatural stuff going on in this forest. There's some scary stuff going on, and this book plays into it so well. It was at times very creepy and very spooky. It was at times very like rough and tumble survivalist. It was at times very feminist. It almost kind of reminded me of like a YA Handmaid's Tale type situation. And also there was like a romance that was very nice. It was just, I liked it. Okay, and then the next book that I have on this list is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is like a classic Gothic romance, which you know I'm always here for. Crimson Peak just started me on a whole love affair with Gothic romance, so I was here for this. It is about our main character. It's like the 1930s. She's in Monte Carlo working for this rich lady, and while she's there, she meets Maxim de Winter, who is a very rich guy. Like, he has an estate. Whirlwind, summer romance, and he takes her back to his estate, Manderley, which is just a character unto itself, and they get married, and she's the new Mrs. De Winter. She's now the mistress of Manderley, and she has all these expectations on her to figure out how to be that when she's poor. She's a peasant who's been lifted to this position, and on top of that, the main thing is that in this house, she cannot get away from like this haunting presence of Rebecca, who is Maxim's ex-wife who died. And it's all amazing and so fun. If you're into that kind of thing, you'll have a blast, because I know I did. All right, and then the last book that I have on this list, the most recent one that I've read, was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is, again, it's a Gothic romance, but it's set in Mexico City. And I think that that was a really, really cool thing, because this genre has so many conventions that are from like this white European perspective. And this book really kind of flipped them on their heads with like this idea of white colonialism. And I loved it so much. It was so good. I think Ashley from Don't Have a Degree in Reading described this the same way, that just so much of the horror in this novel and so much of what is unsettling and disturbing about it has to do with that history of colonialism. And it was just really good. It's about this girl who, her sister had married into this white family who settled in Mexico City and like built a big mansion to look like a European mansion and stuff. And her sister, since she moved in there, hasn't been doing very well. Like, she's had some health problems, having like some mental health problems possibly. So the sister, the main character, goes to the mansion to find out what's going on with her sister and see if she can help. And when she gets there, of course, in true Gothic fashion, there is a lot more going on in the mansion than she expected to find. And she gets wrapped up in it, and again, Gothic, it always teeters on that line between like, is this supernatural or is this just really weird? It's very dark, very gloomy. The atmosphere is so on point, and honestly, I think a lot of people didn't like the ending. Like, I've seen a lot of people saying that it didn't make sense, or it was too weird, or it was too abrupt and stuff like that. I personally loved it. I thought it was so weird, but like in the best way, like the best bizarre way. I loved it. I just thought it was amazing. So this was definitely one of my favorite things that I read this year. I just liked it so much. And it looks like that is it. Those are all of my best and most favorite books of 2020. Like I said, I also have a worst and most disappointing books of 2020 up yesterday. So if you want to go watch me complain about some books I thought were really bad, I will leave that somewhere or linked down below or whatever. But I'm glad that we could end on the happier note of the best books. This year was wild. I mean, in a year with very few highlights and very few things to be happy about, these books definitely added a little bit of, you know, brightness into my world. So yeah, I guess, I mean, this is the last video I'm gonna put up this year, so goodbye to 2020. Bye-bye. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me this year. I had another great year on BookTube with y'all. So I hope that you enjoyed these end of the year videos. Let me know in the comments, like, what was the highlight of your 2020? Thank you so much for watching and hanging out, and I really hope I'll get to talk to you soon. Bye!